Snow drifted gently across the kingdom, blanketing the trees and mountains in silence. Inside the great stone castle, the queen stood by her window, sewing on a frame of black wood. With every careful stitch, she glanced outside at the falling snow. As the needle slipped, a drop of blood fell upon the white fabric, bright and red against the pale cloth. The queen smiled faintly, her eyes lost in thought. "If only I could have a child," she whispered. "One with skin as fair as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as dark as this ebony wood." Not long after, the queen bore a daughter. She was everything her mother had wished for, beautiful beyond measure, with snow-white skin, cherry-red lips, and black hair soft as silk. The kingdom rejoiced, and she was named Snow White. But happiness can be fragile. When Snow White was still a little girl, her mother fell ill and passed away. The king, though grieving, remarried a woman whose beauty was said to rival the sun. She was elegant, cunning, and proud. Her most prized possession was a mirror, tall and framed with gold, that whispered truth to her whenever she asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" For many years, the mirror answered that none could surpass the queen's beauty. It fed her pride, made her stand taller, and sharpened her cruelty toward those she saw as less perfect. Snow White grew quietly under her stepmother's gaze. She was gentle with the servants, kind to the gardeners, and never complained when the queen dismissed her to the edges of the court. She found joy in small things, feeding the birds by the fountain, tending to the roses her real mother had once planted, and humming to the kitchen maids while helping with chores. But beauty blooms even without approval. As Snow White grew into her teenage years, her grace and kindness shone like light through clouds. People of the castle whispered of her charm, her pure smile, her soft words. And one day, when the queen asked her mirror the question she had asked countless times before, the mirror's voice shifted. "You are fair, my queen. But Snow White is fairer still." A silence fell in the queen's chamber, sharp and heavy. For the first time, envy pierced her heart. The thought that Snow White's beauty could outshine her own filled her with a storm of rage. That night, the queen paced her chamber like a restless beast. "If Snow White lives, I will never again be the fairest." Her mind twisted until her thoughts grew dark. The next morning, she summoned a huntsman and handed him a cruel order. "Take the girl deep into the forest. End her life. Bring me her heart, so I may know she is truly gone." The huntsman led Snow White into the woods. She walked beside him with innocent trust, humming softly to calm the rustle of the trees. But when he drew his knife, his hand trembled. Snow White looked up, confused, her wide eyes filled with a trust that pierced him. "Why do you look at me so?" she asked. The huntsman broke down, dropping his weapon to the mossy ground. "I cannot do it. Forgive me, child. Your stepmother commands your death, but I will not stain my soul with such wickedness. Run, Snow White, run, and never return to the castle." Terrified, Snow White fled through the endless forest. Branches scratched her arms, roots tripped her steps, and strange cries echoed around her. She stumbled and wept, but pressed on until, exhausted, she found herself before a small cottage hidden among towering trees. Curiosity pulled her to the door. Inside, the cottage was tidy but strangely small, as though everything was built for people half her size. 7 little chairs, 7 little plates, 7 tiny beds lined in a row. Snow White, hungry and weary, nibbled at a piece of bread left on the table, sipped some water, and finally curled up across the 7 beds, drifting into uneasy sleep. At sunset, the owners returned, 7 dwarfs, miners of the mountains, with hands rough from labor and faces worn by years of work. They stepped inside and froze at the sight of a girl sleeping across their beds. "What is this?" whispered one, stroking his beard. "She looks like a princess," said another. When Snow White woke, she gasped in fright. But the dwarfs' eyes held no malice, only surprise and curiosity. In halting words, she told them her story, the queen's jealousy, the huntsman's mercy, her desperate flight into the woods. The dwarfs listened, their hearts heavy. At last, their eldest spoke. "You may stay here, Snow White. But beware, if your stepmother learns you live, she will stop at nothing to destroy you. Promise us that you will not open the door to strangers." Grateful, Snow White agreed. She lived among them, helping with their meals, mending their clothes, and singing while they mined in the hills. Her laughter brought warmth to their simple home, and for a time, peace returned to her heart. But far away, the queen stood again before her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror's answer sliced like a blade. "You, my queen, are fair. But Snow White, who dwells with the 7 dwarfs, is fairer still." The queen's fury burned hotter. She lives. Her voice dripped venom. Then I shall finish this myself. Disguising herself as a peddler, she went into the forest with laces for corsets. At the dwarf's cottage, she called sweetly, "Pretty wares for sale. Laces to make you beautiful." Snow White, curious and trusting, let her in. The disguised queen tightened the laces around her bodice until Snow White could no longer breathe. She fell faint, collapsing to the floor. The queen fled, believing her work done. But when the dwarfs returned, they cut the laces and Snow White breathed again. "Did we not warn you?" they cried. "Do not let strangers in." Snow White wept with shame and promised to be more cautious. But the queen's rage was unquenched. Again she stood before her mirror. Again it spoke the same truth. Snow White, with the 7 dwarfs, is fairer still. This time, she disguised herself as an old woman selling combs. She pressed a poisoned comb into Snow White's hair, and the girl collapsed once more. The dwarfs saved her again, pulling the comb free. Snow White's fear grew, but kindness was her nature. "She will not come again," she tried to convince herself. But the queen's heart was as dark as the forest at midnight. A third time she sought her mirror, and when she heard Snow White's name again, she prepared her deadliest trick, a red apple, half poisoned, half safe. Anyone who bit from its deadly side would fall into a sleep like death. Disguised as a harmless peasant woman, she came to the cottage. Snow White hesitated at the door, remembering her promise. "Please, dear child," the woman croaked, holding out the apple. "I cannot eat it myself, my teeth are weak. But see, it is harmless, I will take a bite, and you may eat the rest." She bit from the safe side, then offered the poisoned half to Snow White. Tempted by its beauty, red and glistening, Snow White accepted. The moment her teeth sank in, she fell to the floor, her body limp, her eyes closed as if in eternal sleep. The queen returned to her castle triumphant. This time, the mirror confirmed it. "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." Meanwhile, the dwarfs came home to find Snow White lifeless. They wept bitterly, unable to wake her. For days they mourned. At last, unwilling to bury her beauty beneath the earth, they crafted a coffin of glass, laying her within so the world could see her face untouched by death. They set it on the hill outside their cottage, and there they kept watch. Seasons passed. Birds sang around her, flowers bloomed at her side, and the dwarfs tended to her resting place with unending devotion. Word of her beauty spread through the lands until one day, a prince passing through the forest heard the tale and came to see for himself. When he beheld Snow White, he was struck not only by her beauty but by the love that surrounded her, the care of the dwarfs, the flowers and songbirds that seemed to mourn with them. He asked if he might take her to his castle, to honor her and never let her memory fade. The dwarfs, though heartbroken, saw his sincerity and agreed. As the prince's men carried the glass coffin, they stumbled, and the jolt dislodged the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat. Her chest heaved, color rushed back into her cheeks. She opened her eyes, dazed but alive. The dwarfs shouted with joy, the prince knelt beside her in awe, and Snow White, though bewildered, smiled at the faces of those who had never ceased to love her. From that day forward, her life was forever changed.